Well, only one team in the English Premier League has a 100% winning record after 3 games. And according to the bookmakers, only one team is going to win the title. Manchester City are minus 186 with Bet Rivers to win a 4th consecutive top division championship. And that might turn out to be a value play. But at this stage of the season, we're looking for a better return on our money. This is Betting Weekly Premier League Show. You're with myself, Dan Roebuck, while Nigel Seeley and Jack Wright are with me to hopefully give you a little more for your investments and indeed a much quicker return. Nigel, City backers in the futures market, I think, hope for an early stumble. We talked about this, didn't we, in our pre-season preview, but they haven't got it. And with the rest of the league primed maybe to take points off each other, is the title race pretty much over before it started? What are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, what these early starts, Dan? Come on, lads.
No, early starts for you.
I'm absolutely shattered. This is 6:30 in the morning. Got to get up and speak to you two. First 2 people I've seen all week and spoke to.
The day.
Oh my! This is just too much. I like me travelling, but this is in. Got to get up to speak to you two guys. Oh my! I'm going back to bed. I'm absolutely shattered. Anyway, with your question, I mean, I think it was what we expected at the start of the season, wasn't it? I mean, we both said that Man City decided to be. We expected a couple of teams to. Well, I expect a couple of teams to obviously challenge and improve from last season. I don't think we can write off as a season over yet, because I think the season gets done and sorted out when the Champions League comes in. We're only a few weeks away now from the start of the Champions League, and if Manchester City get a tough draw and they have injuries in that competition, they've already lost De Bruyne, which is not a great start for anybody. You know, then if they have an injury to Haaland, then who knows? Well, we said he was very fortunate with his conditioning last season, but at the moment, yeah, they're in the pole position. They've won 3 matches, but they haven't played. They beat Newcastle, but they haven't played the likes of Liverpool yet and Arsenal. And they'll drop points along the way. I think it'd be an interesting title race. The one thing I would say, though, is I think it's probably one of the weakest Premier Leagues I can remember for a long time. I think some of the teams at the bottom of the table, which we'll come on to a little bit on this show, are some of the worst I've ever seen in the Premier League. Really bad. And the gap between the top and the bottom is even growing even bigger than what it is. But I think that to win a Premier League, I think Man City obviously. But I tell you what, I think that win for Liverpool against Newcastle was a big part of the season already. That's the biggest match of the season we've seen, and I still expect a big push. You can remember they've got all those players. He doesn't know his best team yet. Darwin Núñez come off of the sub bench and scored 2, which is brilliant for myself and Jack, I think. But I think there's going to be twists and turns along the way. But at this moment in time, yes, they are the team to beat. But would I bet them? No, not at all.
Jack, backers of Arsenal, Liverpool, don't throw the tickets away just yet. They're bigger prices. Should we go in again? What's your take on the futures early stages of the season?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're all in agreement that it's probably gone to plan at the moment. That win against Newcastle was huge for City. It was probably the only one stumbling block in the early part of the season. We expect them to win at the weekend, go into the international break with a 100% record. The other sides haven't really convinced overly at this moment in time, but it's very, very early days. So there will be opportunities ahead. As I said, we could see some key injuries come this international break, and the transfer window will be closed by that point in time, so no one can react to that. And we've got big games coming up. There will be times, as Nigel says, the Champions League will be a crucial part of the season. The international breaks are as well. But, you know, we know City have been there and done it. Yes, again, echoing what Nigel has said, really, that fancy him to win it. Would I back him at that price? No. There'll be a bit of to and fro, I'm sure, over the course of the season. Early doors yet.
A difficult week for handicappers last week. Nigel, you did turn a profit for us, but only 2 home wins. Are we seeing away teams being more adventurous? Is that a thing, or is it just the luck of the draw with the fixtures, do you think?
I think it's more the latter. I think obviously Manchester City going to Sheffield United. The Liverpool win was the one that really shocked me. Obviously, and play bettors would have got the money on that for Bet Rivers. But I think as I touched on at the beginning, I think there is a real gulf now between the top 7, top 8 in the Premier League and the rest. The rest is really poor. I mean, I'm going to talk a lot of teams at the bottom here, and my common theme is, and on my notes is like in big capital letters, crap. So like it's going to be quite interesting to see. But I think that's why you're going to see these away wins, because years ago people used to say to you, don't bet teams away in the Premier League. It's a tough place to go and all that. A lot of things this season on football and tennis. I mean, tennis as well is obviously the motive for the US Open. But there's a lot of things now in betting that go against all the traditional stuff that I was taught and as a bookmaker and as a bettor. Lots of different things here. I mean, the golf here in the tennis, for example. Sorry, I just sort of move on to that a little bit. Novak Djokovic and Alcaraz are so much better than everyone else, and the handicaps they're offering at like 10.5 and 11.5 in their game matches are things that I was always told to avoid. Never get with anyone at 10.5. Never get with anyone at 11.5. Never play under games at 25.5, 26.5. It's wrong. They're too good now. And the same is in the world of soccer in the Premier League. The gap between the big boys and the bad sides. You should always be told never bet an odds on away in the Premier League. Now Manchester City go away at matches at -$4. I mean, and they win. So it's changing. The landscape is definitely changing.
Yeah, forget about the tennis. We've got a separate podcast and show for that. Two blokes.
I mentioned you on the tennis. I mentioned you on the tennis.
They're quite good. Oh, do we do a little bit of cross fertilization?
They're very understanding. They let me start 8:30. Not like you do.
Jack, anything in these away wins? If you backed every single away team this season in the Premier League, you would have made a profit. Anything in it for you? Is it just as Nigel was saying, you've got better teams playing at home away at the moment?
Yeah, not loads. We had a couple of chunky winners last weekend, didn't we? West Ham being the biggest surprise, going to Brighton. Didn't think we saw that coming. I certainly didn't. Obviously, haven't put Brighton up, but they were, I think, plus 500 going into that game. So that's obviously swayed it a bit. And we also had the likes of Liverpool and Wolves at around about plus 200 that would have added a little bit of extra juice to that recap that you then put forward there. But again, I think what I've noticed this season is that if you want to side with one of the better sides, as Nigel said, you ain't got a hope winner at home, really, unless they're taking on one of each other. And then you kind of want to normally give that a bit of a swerve. So you do have to look for when they're playing away, and you can get a little bit of a decent price that you can get stuck into. So that's the one thing. I think the home odds at the moment are really prohibitive, and you have to be a little bit, kind of bit clever with what you're doing, or look elsewhere.
Just one thing, right. Jake. Just one thing. When you talk about team, I mean, Brighton are the perfect example of a team that shows you how much the Premier League betting landscape has changed. Brighton would be considered the top 5, top 6 Premier League side in this country, probably 6, 7 top Premier League sides in this country. And they start at home against teams in the bottom 3 at -450. Now that shows you the gap between the top and the bottom. And this season, I think, like I say, this show is that the gap is bigger than it's ever been.
Saturday morning football to kick things off for us. Early kickoff time stateside. It's absolutely perfect for Nigel. Obviously, it's Sheffield United versus Everton. He'll be out of bed right at the bar for this one. Don't worry about that. Blades are plus 205. Everton plus 155. The draw plus 215. Sheffield United minus 240 to go down. Everton plus money to be relegated plus 175. There's a lot to pick out in this game. I've got a few concerns about the selections of the boys, but let's get the picks up top. Nigel, what do you like in this one?
Well, I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, like, I don't know if you saw my Instagram and the travel page here. And, the reason that I do travel in first class in luxury is because I bet under 2.5 goals. So, I won't be changing my format.
Are you booked first on the way back, or have you got to wait for the results?
No, of course I'm on the first class. Don't worry about that, mate. If this goes my way, first class isn't the economy to me. If these results go my way, I'm getting my own flight. I'm getting my own flight. Don't worry about that.
Get NetJets on the line. What's the play?
The play here is under 2.5 goals. I'm not changing the strategy here. I mean, we've talked about different bets here. We've talked about extra time being added on in the Premier League, and we've talked about the different kinds of approach to betting overs and unders. There's certain things that you look at these two sides and just look at the concept of the game. Both of them have I use this analogy quite a lot on this show, but Sheffield United have had an absolute terrible start to the season, and Everton have had the worst start ever in their history. They're a club in complete and utter crisis. They haven't scored a goal in the Premier League, obviously being 1-0 by Fulham, 1-0 by Wolves. That game should have been 0-0. The 0-0 detector would have earned its money after 1 week, but he's bleeping again for this one. Sheffield United, obviously no wins, and a 0-0 draw in midweek. I know it was the Carabao Cup, but 0-0 against Lincoln is not something that you would be wanting if you're a Sheffield United fan. So if you look at the two matchups, they're just both lacking complete confidence in front of goal. They haven't got a goal scorer. I know you're going to tell me that they brought someone in, but if you're one of the top goal scorers in Europe and Everton come calling, you're just hoping that the Saudis come in quick, because you're not going to be going to Merseyside the way they're at the moment. Honestly, a lot of people we want to go there. The club is in a bad way, and Sheffield United here are desperate for a point. If you look at the Sheffield United's record in the Premier League season, a 1-0 loss against Palace, 2-1 against Forest, but that would have cashed under 2.5 goals if it wasn't for that last gasp goal that was great for us. And 2-1 against Manchester City. That game should never have been 2-1. It should have been 1-0. Sheffield United scored a fluke goal and then Man City went and won it late on. So unders betters in Sheffield United game really could have sat there and said we could have won on all three of these matches. And Everton, well, they haven't scored. So if you're betting overs in football matches, you really need both teams to really contribute to the goal scoring chances. And I just can't see both these two sides contributing. I would be, I think that the managers here, if you ask them, Sean Dyche and Higginbottom, that you would, if you took a point, they'd say yes. They need to steady the ship. Everton need to steady the ship. They need to get a good cup run going in the Carabao Cup. That win was good for them. They need a point. They need a penalty win 1-0. They need something just to get the pressure off them. And I think a draw here for both sides would be pretty good. And I'm going to go for under 2.5 goals in a very cagey, terrible game. And if you think I'm getting up at 7:30 in the morning to go and watch Sheffield United be Everton, you have got another thing coming. I'm going to watch a guy workman in this hotel paint a wall and sit and stare at it for 90 minutes rather than go and watch that.
Jack, what's the play for you? Variation on a theme, I think.
Yeah, it's very, very similar, isn't it? It's both teams to score no for me. That's at -115. So slightly more aggressive play, but along the same lines. We talked about it at the start of the season, and it's come to pass. Sheffield United, Everton, Wolves, those sides just don't score goals. Regardless of your XG, creating chances, you ain't got the guy that's going to score it at the end of the day. You've got no hope. And they've shown that at this moment in time. As I said, there's been kind of 2 goals across all the games between these two sides, both by Sheffield United, and so both have got elements about them that you wouldn't put down to being fantastic play to set them up. Everton there's only 2 sides in the English top 4 tiers that haven't scored a goal yet. Everton being one of them, Cheltenham being the other one, and it's not an unusual occurrence for them. They've failed to score in 17 Premier League games since the start of last season, so it's just what they do. And yes, they've brought in a new signing. We know it normally takes time for a sign to come in from Europe and settle, especially in this side. It's not, it's just not going to be fun for him at all. From what, the bits and pieces I've read about him and done a bit of digging into it. As it stands at the moment, if he comes in and sets the world alight, then we might have to look, we'll have to realign our sights. But as it stands right now, I'm happy to take as we've mentioned before, our viewpoint of how this is going to play out pre-season. At this moment in point of time in the early part of the season, there's nothing to change your mind on that. As I say, both those sides were terrible in the cup in midweek. Yeah, Everton kind of scrapped through and got a result, but that side were the 92nd ranked side in the English football at this moment in time. They'd scored I've got 1 point this season in the English 4th tier and conceded 12 goals. So if Everton weren't going to be getting a result there, then they were really, really in severe trouble. And so Sheffield United, I thought they were looking for a confidence booster against Lincoln. They played McBurney, who's their kind of main striker. They've obviously brought in Cameron Archer, who's done him well in the Championship. Can he fire in the Premier League? The jury's going to be out on that one because he's going to be in a side that are going to struggle to create too much. So they drew a blank there. They had 2 shots on target against Lincoln, who was their 3rd tier English League side. 0.36 XG shows you what they were creating. I know it was rotated, but he still had a decent amount of first teamers in that, including the 2 strikers that they hope are going to be able to fire them to safety this season. So didn't look pretty at all. And so, yeah, for basically on this one for me, I'm just going for both teams not to score. It can be 1-0, 2-0 or 0-0.
Unders, both teams to score no are the 2 plays. You've sort of addressed my concerns. I was going to mention the striker. You both talked about him. And also the fact that surely at some stage, Everton's XG has got to be regressed a little bit, 5.53, according to the model that I use. Just one quick thought from both of you. There'll be a lot of bettors looking at the weekend card, reflecting on what happened in the Carabao Cup, the League Cup. Do you scratch through it completely, Nigel? Is it just a non-factor when you're looking at Premier League games at the weekend?
I say that when I was doing the research this morning, at 5:30 in the morning, by the way, you guys, any match that helped my back and my point of view that was the Carabao Cup was very much used. Anyone that didn't was completely and utterly disregarded. That's how I treat the Carabao Cup.
Jack, irrelevant or not?
Largely irrelevant, yeah. Highly rotated sides. It seems that no one really wants to win it now until they get to the quarterfinals. So if they can fluke their way to that point, then they get serious. Up to then, very, very few sides in the top tier. They've got other agendas. Simple as that.
Brentford versus Bournemouth next on our agenda here. This is 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday. Brentford minus 143, Bournemouth plus 375. All the correct odds you can see revolving around on screen, although they could change running into the weekend. Both left it late in the League Cup. I don't know if you looked at this for your narrative here, Nigel. What's the play in the game between Brentford and Bournemouth?
I'm going to keep it very simple. As you know, I'm a simple man. I'm the Mike Bassett of the if anyone hasn't watched that film, make sure you watch Mike Bassett, England manager. I'm the Mike Bassett of the punting world, the betting world. I'm thinking very simple. Don't like me shots on targets. Don't like me tackles and things like that. Very simple. Money line totals. That's it. Money line. Keep it simple. Brentford to beat Bournemouth here minus 143. I fell into the trap last season of betting Brentford to get relegated, thinking they had that second season curse that some of the other teams have had in the Premier League. And I was so wrong to do that. And I really like Brentford as a football club, especially at home. I think you can get really good lines at Brentford at home, and there's no one really, they think they're going to have a slip up. This side isn't. I mean, they've got an excellent manager. I would consider him in the top 6 managers in the Premier League. I really do think he's got a top job in it. I was surprised that Tottenham never went for him, but obviously they went for Ange and it's done well. So I like Brentford here. I like the way they play at home. I like the way they do the high press. I like the way they push. And I like the way they really start games fast. You'll never see Brentford start a game slowly. And they blitz sides. And I think Bournemouth are a side that could have a little bit of problems this season. They've spent a huge amount of money, which is incredible by Bournemouth standards. A new manager's come in. He doesn't know his best side yet. The players that have come in, I don't think have really worked as yet. The jury's out on them. So I'm not really convinced by Bournemouth as a side. If this Premier League wasn't as weak as it was, i.e. Sheffield United, Luton and Everton, you would be looking at Bournemouth as a side that could get involved in a relegation battle. I know Jack bet them last season, tipped them up last season to get relegated. So these are two sides that we both predicted. But they got rid of the manager. They've gambled a lot on this new manager, and the gamble sometimes backfires. And I've got to I think Bournemouth could be a rebase of a side in 2 to 3 weeks' time. Brentford at home, you know exactly what you're going to get. 2-2 draw against Tottenham, where they played exceptionally well. Tottenham, a 1-1 draw with Palace, and their home record last season in the Premier League was one of the best in the Premier League. They only lost 2 matches at home, and that was the 4th best record in the Premier League. Only Liverpool, Manchester United, and Manchester City had a better home record than Brentford. With the concerns at Bournemouth, the way they played, they were really poor against Liverpool. I know we would say, well, they were really poor against Liverpool, but they were 1-0 up in that game. Liverpool had the players sent off, and they lost 3-1. Liverpool seemed to do well when they have a player sent off this season. That's what they seem to come alive then. Really poor against Tottenham last week. Tottenham got all the plaudits, but Bournemouth did nothing. And I think Bournemouth could be a side that could struggle. I think that bottom 6 beckons, or bottom 5, 4. Well, I'm not quite sure if they get relegated, because like I say, I think there's some weaker sides there. But I think Brentford at home at odds of minus 143 is disrespectful against a sub like Bournemouth when you consider how good they are. If they get beat, they usually get beat by the big sides. They did draw a few games, but I think against this Bournemouth side and the way that Brentford have started the season, full of confidence, full of goals. No Ivan Toney, but it hasn't stopped them. They've got goals all over the pitch. I like Brentford here at minus 143.
They are plus 300 to go down, incidentally. Bournemouth. Is Iraola in trouble briefly? Nigel, plus 1,300 to be the next manager to go. They've got Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal next 3 games after this one.
Could be, yeah. I mean, it could be a good trading price. The trouble is they've spent a lot of money, and I think
they've trusted him a bit, haven't they?
Yeah. If he hadn't spent the money and I think he would go. But I mean, put it this way: if it was the manager from last season, Gary O'Neill, then he'd be minus 250 in this predicament, wouldn't he? I know they got rid of him after what was one of the best seasons they could ever have. But if it was him in charge here, then it would be a minus money favourite to take be the first manager sack. But I think with the money they've spent, I think they might give a bit of time. And I think there's other managers who are under a bit more pressure than him currently. But I think I could see them not winning a game out of those 4 matches, and then they might do a knee-jerk reaction. But it has happened before. We've seen some big managers come to clubs and not last long, especially foreign managers, and not last long. So wouldn't surprise me at all.
Keep an eye on the price. Certainly Liverpool-Villa next. This time last week, we were talking about Jack's bookings parlay, which Jack, just very briefly on it, I thought you were desperately unlucky because there's loads and loads of cards, apart from in one of your games where there was none in the Brentford-Brighton game. You're unlucky in that one. Liverpool-Villa for you next. This is Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern. Liverpool short price favourites here, -165. Villa +360 and the draw +390. The goal line, incidentally, is over under 3.5 here if you're looking at the odds on the Bet Rivers site or the app. Jack, you've gone for an Asian total here. Usually when we look at Asian totals, that's the reserve of the Euro show. That's a Steve Wiss, Will White play. We don't really, as Nigel says, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure we're comfortable on the Premier League show with an Asian total line here.
We'll have to check these bets when they come out next week. They might not fit the category.
Jack, come on then, talk us through Liverpool Villa.
Yeah, it's an education.
Explain the bet as well. Half of our listeners won't understand it. Come on.
Well, half the people on the show at the moment don't understand it either. So it's over 3.25. So half our stake is on 3 Asian goal line. Half our stake is on over 3.5 goals. Basically, if there's 3 goals in this, we get half a loss or half our stake is refunded. So for the full win, we basically need 4 or more goals. So that's a high line. There's no getting away from it. It's one I wouldn't normally want to be taking on, to be fair, but Nigel touched on it earlier. If you're going to be playing overs at this moment in time, you need both teams to come to the party. And I just see that in this game. I just see this being a little bit of a chaotic game, especially as far as Liverpool are concerned at Anfield. And it just seems full of goals. Villa are going to go there full of confidence. You know, they started the season, couldn't have been any worse. 5-1 defeat at Newcastle, but wiped the goal difference out straight away by scoring 4 goals themselves next game. Then a good 3-1 win at Burnley last week. In between that, they went and scored 5 goals away from home in the Europa Conference League. So there's goals in the side, there's confidence in the side, and the goals are coming from all over the place as well. We know how Liverpool are going to play. This is at Anfield. They're going to play full throttle. That's the only way they know how. They are so strong there. They've only lost 1 in their last 43 league games at Anfield, which is an incredible record. They average scoring 2.44 goals themselves across that period of time. So anything close to their average, we just need Villa to come, say, to the party, and I'm sure they will. Set up really nicely at the moment. They've got that back 3, which allows their wing backs to push on high. Saw that last week, illustrated no better than the fact that Matty Cash scored 2 goals from right wing back. He had 6 shots in total as well. So it shows you how advanced they are. The other side, Luca Digne provided an assist. So we know what Liverpool's fullbacks are like. Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, they'll be advanced. There's going to be lots of space in behind both sides. So that screams like there's going to be lots and lots of chances as well. I just think Villa are lethal on the break, and they're going to get plenty of opportunities against this Liverpool side that, say, only play one way at Anfield especially. And no Virgil van Dijk for Liverpool either. The defence has been a bit shaky over the last sort of season or so anyway. So without him as well, it's going to be even more chaotic. We've got doubts about who's going to be playing there. Konate's out injured, but linked with Saudi. Joe Gomez has been linked with Saudi as well, of course, as Mo Salah too. And that midfield, which is transitional for Liverpool, I think it's going to be exploited by this sort of settled Villa side. They've got McGinn in there. They've got Douglas Luiz in there. 2 fantastic players, great energy in the middle of the park, and the ability to break through the lines as well. So I think that's going to cause chances at both ends, especially. So as far as Liverpool are concerned, defence is the best form of attack. We know what we get with Salah. We're going to get close to 20 goals a season as long as he stays. But his assists have caught the eye this season. His link-up play has been exceptional. That ball he played through for Nunez against Newcastle was a brilliant, brilliant pass. And Nunez obviously scored 2 goals off the bench. So great to have him with confidence. We talked about him in the future show that his second season is a strong one in the past. And he started well with that. That's going to give him, say, a great boost. Will he start this one? Possibly so. But they've got so many options up there, and none more so than Diaz out on the left-hand side there, who I loved when he first exploded onto the scene at Liverpool, say, last season before that injury. So getting him back's like a new signing. And I've also noticed that both his goals this season have come from around the penalty spot. So he seems to be coming a lot more central and taking advantage of those balls coming across, where last season he was more outside the area, more speculative. So that's going to bode well for goals in that respect as well. And the final thing here, I just think this suits Emery and his tactics so well. Since arriving in November at Villa Park, only Manchester City with 10 wins and Arsenal with 9 wins have got more than his 7 wins with Aston Villa, and they've only failed to score in 2 of his 28 Premier League games since joining the club. So phenomenal record, really exciting game. Shame it's not on telly over in the UK. Instead, we've gone for Crystal Palace versus Wolves.
Yeah. Nigel can watch the Liverpool-Villa game in New York. Don't worry about that. Or potentially he'll be tuning into Palace Wolves, given the fact, Nigel, you've got a selection in it, and it's tried and tested, isn't it? Here we've got Palace at -108, Wolves plus 325. Look, a fair price. Draw plus 250. What's the play here, Nigel?
Under 2.5 goals. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It's as simple as that. I won't be watching this game either. I'll be painting another wall, and then you don't have to watch the matches to cash the tickets. You just all you have to be on the right side of it. No problem. So
have they fixed their broken pipe outside yet? You could watch that water flowing past if that's the case.
I ask for the sea view, and that's what I got. Anyway, that's what you get here. Anyway, let's talk about this game. I mean, it's under 2.5 goals. I mean, Palace. I don't think Palace have got a striker. Obviously, Sahara's moved on and they're struggling for goals. Eze is obviously the main man now. And he's playing well, but he's not getting on the end of the chances. And I think this is a game that looks cagey again. I mean, if you look at Wolves so far this season, 1-0 against Sheffield United. Palace this season, 1-0 against Sheffield United, 1-0 against Arsenal, 1-1 against Brentford. No goal scorer. There's a lot of teams with no goal scorers. Palace are another side, I think, are regressing this season rather than going forward. I think the manager is obviously quite stale in his approach in tactics in Roy Hodgson. I know he came in last season and changed it all around, but it was the Palace supporters were very critical of his tactics and his way that he approached football matches. Before that, he came in as the Messiah, saved them, but they forgot what he was like. They demanded him to go because the brand of football was boring. And I think now he's come in, he's back to what he did before. It's not so exciting anymore. With Wolves, I think the Manchester United game showed that all the chances they created, they couldn't put the ball back in the net. They caught Brighton on a really good day. Brighton racing to a lead, and they scored a consolation of 4-1 win. And then they played the most dour game of the season so far against Everton in a 1-0 victory, which they left it late. It just screams under goals here. Palace without a striker. Wolves, I've always been a team that I always have on the radar for unders. And also Wolves, I just think there's a bit of some problems behind the scenes, obviously, with the guy wanting to move to Manchester City. Sorry, he's gone on strike. So that sort of may sort of affect the way they play here and takes a lot of their sort of offensive and their creativity away from this side. If you look at this bat in the Premier League, these two sides have met 11 times in the Premier League, and in 10 of them, it's cashed under 2.5 goals. Only once it hasn't cashed. And so I think if you look at the stats, not really a huge man on the stats here, but I just think that Palace, without Sahar, that takes a huge goal threat away from them. Wolves, trouble behind the scenes, always a traditionally an under team. And I think these are two very, very evenly matched teams. And I think they'll just cancel each other out in another dow. People say to me, Nigel, do you like football matches where you see the 4-4s and 5-4s and 5-5s? That doesn't excite me. That doesn't float my boat. What I like is a boring 0-0 with no shots on target in December in the freezing cold between two newly promoted teams, howling rain, wind, frost. Now that's Premier League football for me. That's what gets my juices flowing. 4-4s, 5-4s, 5-5s. No. 0-0, 0-0, 0-0. If there's ever a week in the Premier League where every game ends 0-0, I will never do this show again.
If you'd have backed Wolves every single game since they returned to the top flight, 10% return on investment, 20-point profit. That's simple. Talking unders here to follow Nigel's team. One more game to preview. It's the big one as well. It's Arsenal Manchester United. Just before we get Jack's pick in it, how big's the handle on this one? I mean, this, as far as the Premier League is concerned, so far this season, would you say it's the biggest take, the biggest game in terms of money bet?
Well, probably not. I think Liverpool-Newcastle would be the most money after what I was speaking to the guys at Bet Rivers. And obviously there was a huge gamble on Newcastle as well, which it saw public money. When people see the money for the team, the public want to be involved. So unless there's a sort of a gamble develops on here, I think this will it'll be up there. Don't get it wrong. And as the season goes on, the more handle gets going as well as we get a little bit of form. But I think the biggest match so far for handle is that, without question, Liverpool v Newcastle. The game of Newcastle against Liverpool obviously was the gamble on Newcastle, and also the Manchester City against Newcastle game was very heavy. There's also a gamble on Newcastle. So what's been developed here in the last few weeks of the season is that Newcastle seem to be a public betting team, whether they can sustain that after the punters keep faith in them after two losses. That's the thing to question.
Okay, interesting. We'll see what sort of line movements there are. Keep your eye on the Bet Rivers site, because there's always plenty of live movements quite late as well when it comes to the Premier League games. We've got Jack back to the good side rather than the dark side here, because from Asian total overs and quarter ball handicaps, we're back to the money line. Jack, what do we like here? Arsenal -130, United +340, draw +300. What's the selection?
It's Arsenal to win, and touched on it earlier. The better sides, the elite sides at home, you can't normally back them unless you're taking a big handicap, unless they're kind of playing each other. And this is one that comes into that category. Yes, Arsenal are strong favourites for this, but backable at -130. And this is based around, one, how Man United has started this season, and two, how they've performed against the better sides since Ten Hag's been at the club. Arsenal have won 4 of the last 5 meetings at the Emirates between these two sides. So it's a strong record in recent times. The home side, when these two tend to meet, tend to win. That's how it's been over the last couple of seasons anyway. Arsenal, we know, strong at home, 3rd best home record in the Premier League last season. Obviously done well, come 2nd. And I've not liked what I've seen of United so far this season. They've got 6 points on the board, and I think they've started very similar to how they started last season. They got thumped at Brentford, and they had a terrible start to the campaign. But I think as far as performance is concerned, they're not far off from that than last season. They just happened to have got 6 points on the board. A bit fortunate. It wouldn't have been surprised if they had like 1 or even none, to be honest, if decisions had gone against them and teams they were playing had took their chances. Injuries as well have now come into it. I wonder kind of if it was a fitness scenario. When you see how they perform, they seem a little bit sluggish, but they've now lost Varane, which is a big blow. The biggest, though, is Luke Shaw now being injured. They're obviously now scrambling around to try and find a left back, be that Cucurella or someone else they're going to try and pick up. But again, Shaw has been a player that's been gone central when the central defenders have been injured. So that option's out now. But of course, we know probably the strongest part of that Arsenal side is Saka out on that right-hand side. So he could possibly have a field day against a stand-in left back. It's talking about being Dallo at the moment, who is normally a right back. So him on the wrong side could be all kinds of trouble for United. The record that I talked about is woeful. If this was a Brentford or a mid-table side that were going to these, say, elite sides in the Premier League and getting beaten time after time, then Arsenal would be unbackable here. United have gone to Tottenham this season, lost 2-0. That's a common theme. Against the top 9 who finished top 9 last season in the Premier League, they picked up 1 point, and that was at Tottenham. 7 defeats in the other games against those other sides up there. They scored 8 goals in total, and they conceded 28. And of course, that included 7 against Liverpool, 6 against Man City, and 3 goals here as well. I think at the start of the season, Arsenal haven't really been blowing me away as how they've performed, but they've done okay, and they probably should have beaten Fulham last week as well to then gone on with a 100% record. I just feel like Arteta's possibly overthinking things a little bit, trying to kind of keep one step ahead of the game. Partey out as a right back and that kind of stuff. I expect him to go back to basics in this because this is a big game. The Emirates crowd, who have been good and behind them over the last season, this is that kind of first big game of the season. They'll be really wanting to put a statement out against Man United. So I'd expect Partey to go in the middle, Ben White back out as a right back. More of the tried and tested that we saw last season with those couple of additions in there, which will be kind of obviously an improvement as by the likes of Declan Rice being in the setup. But as far as Arsenal, I expect them to be flying out of the traps here. They tend to score early goals against United. Those 4 wins I talked about, they score goals in the 24th, the 3rd, the 8th, and the 12th minute. So expect a fast start, and they can blow United away early doors in this one. So for me, I'm going simple, Arsenal to win.
On the money line, Arsenal to win. Nigel, if you had a free $10 play in this game, what would it be?
Well, I mean, this stage of the season last season, I disagreed with Jack on a match between Manchester United and Liverpool because I remember it because I was coming back from Prague and I was at the airport and Liverpool, Manchester United beat Liverpool.
What sort of state were you in the Prague airport, by the way?
I was in first class. What state would you think I was in? Anyway,
I don't know. I do remember the Instagram feed.
And
it was a lively weekend.
I was with Simon Holden. That's all you need to know. Anyway, and the end. Anyway, you stumbled me there. No, we're going back. I remember disagreeing with Jack there because at the time Manchester United, it was Manchester United Liverpool. Liverpool had a great start. Manchester United had a really poor start, and I'm a similar kind of crossroads there. Manchester United, I think, will improve much on what we've seen so far. I think Arsenal are going backwards from last year. I don't think they're as strong. I mean, you see them every week, Dan. You probably know a little bit more than I would on it. But from what I've seen about it, I think he's tinkering around with it far too much, and I don't. And I think that I wouldn't bet them minus 130. Let's put it that way. If I was going for a bet, I'd probably have Dalot to be booked, have 4 set tackles and 2 interceptions and 6 throw-ons. That's what I'd probably bet. But no, I'd probably go for the draw. I'd probably just have a small wager on the draw. But I think Man United. It's a big game for Man United because if Man United lose this one, they're well by a lot of points behind Man City already, and people will be saying their challenge is over. So I'll probably pay the bookings or something like that, maybe over the bookings. I don't know the referee, but I look at the bookings. But I don't think I'll be rushing to bet Arsenal at minus 130. I'm happy to be proven completely wrong and Arsenal win 4 or 5-0. But I think sometimes we just get a little bit carried away with what we've seen in 3 matches. And I think Man United will get better than what we've seen.
Plus 300 the draw, incidentally, and the goal line is set at over 3.5, over and under 3.5 at plus 140 overs. Minus 177 unders. Best bets before we wrap things up. Nigel, what is your best bet of the 3 that you've talked us through over the course of the last 35 minutes or so?
Under 2.5 goals, Sheffield United against Everton, minus 143.
And Jack, what's your best bet this weekend?
Yeah, so all our eggs aren't in one basket. I'm going to go with goals in Liverpool-Villa.
Okay, good stuff. Nigel, Jack, thanks for your company. Good luck with your picks. That is a wrap for week 4 of Betting Weekly Premier League show. We have got a week off next week for the international break, but of course, there's plenty more content from Bet Rivers across all our social media channels. How long are you in New York for, Nigel, for the tennis?
I come back on Sunday. We're off to see Andy Murray play Grigor Dimitrov today, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one. But there's a stomach bug around New York at the moment, and a lot of players are affected by it. So you've got a lot of people in the locker room. There's talk of players going down with illness. So hopefully I don't catch it. And if I am ill, it's purely illness. It's nothing else.
Yeah, we'll believe you. Many won't. Nigel, Jack, thanks very much. Stay informed, of course, across all our social media channels. At Because We Win is our X feed. From all of us, it's goodbye.